The Huskers enjoyed a nice win up against Purdue last week. They sit 7-0 for the first time since 2001, and the guys on offense are making big plays to keep that streak alive. Check out wide receiver Stanley Morgan Jr., for example. Now, he doesn't actually have rockets for feet, guys, but you couldn't tell the difference on Saturday the way he went up for those receptions. For some insight on their matchup against Wisconsin this week, we sent it to Mike.
46-yarder into the wind, and he got it through the uprights. Gaglianone puts Wisconsin in front with 4 seconds to go.
That's how it ended last year between Nebraska and Wisconsin. As for this year, we bring in Matt Davison now from Lincoln to talk about this game. Matt, let's start off on the Nebraska side before we break down this weekend's contest. We've been talking about how their last 2 opponents weren't great opponents, so you either crush them and you were supposed to crush them, or you barely win and you were supposed to win by more, and sure enough, the latter happened.
Yeah, I mean, this team is undefeated, and that's the bottom line. Nebraska hasn't been beaten yet, but the last couple weeks and even earlier in the season, there were some teams you felt like Nebraska maybe should have handled a little easier than they did. And that's getting picky, right? There's a lot of teams that would like to be undefeated right now. But you look at the last couple weeks, and there are concerns with this team for sure. And I think it starts up front with the offensive line. Tommy Armstrong has really been running around, getting chased by defensive linemen off the edge. And Nebraska's offensive line has been beat up. And we all know when Tommy Armstrong is under pressure and he's forced to make big decisions, once in a while he'll make a bad one. And overall, Tommy has played well this year. But when he gets rushed out of the pocket as much as he has the last couple of weeks, he's going to make mistakes. And if that happens this weekend at Wisconsin, I think we all know that it'll end bad for Nebraska. So the offensive line is my biggest concern right now. Nebraska has to be able to hold up in the trenches this weekend.
How would you say is the best way to describe the mental state of this team? Because they don't have a signature win right now, thanks to Oregon being, bad at American football. So they know that this week and the following week will be road games against top 15 teams that would help give them the credibility they're searching for.
Well, I think the best part of this football team is that they believe that they're going to win. And you look at a year ago, where this team was a year ago after the loss at Purdue, and to think how far this team has come mentally, it's unbelievable to me. And yeah, you could say Nebraska should have put some of these teams away earlier in the game than they have at times this year, but they've responded every time in the second half and mainly in the fourth quarter where Nebraska has been dominant. And so I think it's just the belief that this team has in each other. I think it's the senior class that wants to go out with a much better year than what they had last year as juniors. And so I think that's the most important thing to this team right now, is that they really believe that they're going to go on the road and win, when, let's be honest, most people don't give Nebraska a chance the next couple of weeks.
Before we brought you in, we showed that clip of Gaglianone from last year's game. Sure enough, Nebraska has struggled in recent years against Wisconsin, losing 4 of the 5 games against them. What explains that?
Well, it's mainly started with guys like Melvin Gordon and Monte Ball and James White. Those are great players, and they've been running behind good offensive lines. And really, it came down to Nebraska not being able to stand up physically against Wisconsin in the trenches. And that's why I think that's going to be the key again this weekend. Nebraska has had the lead a couple of times against Wisconsin and had a total change of fortune where Wisconsin came back and just put it on the Huskers a couple of times under Bo Pelini. Last year was a much better game, came down to the last couple of minutes with a couple of field goals, and Nebraska was on the short end of that one as well. But the Huskers have faced some great backs against Wisconsin over the years, and it's going to happen again this weekend with Clement, who's having a great season and a guy that can really hurt you in a lot of different ways, and a physical runner who's going to really test Nebraska and Nebraska's front 7 more than the Huskers have been faced with all season long against other opponents. That's why this weekend on Saturday night, that offensive line and the running game of Wisconsin is going to be the key for the Huskers to stop.
We also saw in that last graphic we showed that the Huskers have been on the wrong side of the turnover battle recently. How much do you think that'll matter this weekend?
It's always big in games that are going to be close. I think this will be a close game. I don't think it'll be a high-scoring game. And so turnovers are always going to be big. Nebraska's been much better this year than they have been in the past That starts with Tommy Armstrong. He's been better this year. Nebraska's defense has been good at taking it away, too. When the opponent has thrown it to Nebraska's defense, they've caught it. And the secondary has been big for the Huskers this year. Again this weekend, if they can force a turnover or two and get a short field, that could be the difference in what everybody expects to be a fairly low-scoring game. A couple of short fields, easy scoring opportunities could be the difference for either of these teams, depending on who's able to force those turnovers in this one.
And finally, Tommy Armstrong hasn't had Jordan Westerkamp for a little while, but it's starting to sound like he's coming back. Is that right?
Yeah, and Jordan's excited, and everybody in Nebraska is obviously excited. This is Nebraska's #1 weapon on the offensive side in the passing game for sure. And for Tommy Armstrong, it's his best friend and his roommate and the guy that he looks to in the huddle for support, and he looks to for an outlet every time he needs a big third down. So this is a mental boost for Nebraska's offense and for Tommy Armstrong, and it's also on the physical side. Nebraska needs to get healthy on offense. This is a big step in the right direction with getting Jordan Westerkamp back out there on Saturday night.
A big game Saturday evening, a big analyst here to talk about it. Matt Davison, thanks as always, sir.
Thanks, Mike.